Hi, I'm Jay Andrews with Laguna Tools. Today we're here with the Fusion F2 table saw. This is one of our most popular table saws, and it comes pre-wired as 110 volt, which is great for most customers. We do have some customers, however, that have 220 volt power in their shop and they want to convert the saw over. The good news is that the motor is a dual voltage motor and it can accept 110 or 220 volt, but there are some changes that need to be made. The first step is to replace the switch assembly that comes with the cord and plug, and then the second step is at the motor you'll need to make some changes to the way that the wires are connected at the motor, and we'll go through and address that. There's an earlier version of this saw that does not have the digital readout for the tilt. The new version from 2022 and up has the digital readout, and this digital readout requires a different switch. If you go to our website and go under the accessories tab, you'll find pre-DRO versions of the switch, and then you'll find the versions that have the digital readout, and they're labeled as such. The kit will come with the harnesses needed, the switch assembly, which includes the main switch and the reset switch, and it includes a set of instructions inside. Let's go through, open up the package, open up the side of the machine. You'll want to start by making sure that your machine is unplugged and that you don't have any electrical applied to the machine. And I'll grab a Phillips head screwdriver, and a comfortable rolling chair is a good help as well. There's 4 screws that hold the plastic cover on the side of the machine. Remove the screws, remove the cover, and this will expose the motor. With the motor exposed, we'll open up the side cover of the motor where the wires go in. Inside the cover that covers the motor connections, you'll find that there's a small wiring diagram, and it shows the 110 volt connections, which is as it is now. It also shows the 220 volt connections that you're going to make inside the machine. Those connections are also shown in the wiring diagram that came in the instructions with this kit. While we're still on the outside of the machine and with a screwdriver in our hand, let's go ahead and remove the screws that hold the power cord in the back of the saw. Now, feed the cord inside the machine. The next step is to slide the existing switch off of the front rail, and we'll have to pull off the end cap to do that. There are 2 Phillips head screws that hold the end cap in place. You can loosen it and let it hang down if you wanted to, but sometimes they can get broken, so I remove them completely. Next, grab a 10mm wrench and loosen up the bolts that hold the switch on the rail. And then slide the switch off of the front rail. Back at the front of the saw, use the Phillips head screwdriver to remove the 4 screws that hold the digital readout in place. Behind the digital readout board are 2 ground wires, and these attach to the metal that's at the back of this opening. We'll remove these 2 ground wires and save the hardware, as the new ground wires will attach in these locations. There's a small washer with each of these screws to make sure that you grab that as well. With those wires loose, simply pull those forward. And now we're going to remove the connections with the black wires and white wires on the board. These use a push-in connector, and those will snap right off the board just like that. You'll see that the black wires, these 2 black wires, are clipped together, as well as the white wires. Just grab the 2 connectors and separate the 2 wires, pull them into their individual bundles, and now we can feed these right back through the hole at the bottom of this junction box. There's one set. The other set has this wire that hangs through, so be careful of the other wire. And you may have to feed one or two connectors through at a time if they bind up. And now is a good time to blow out the sawdust inside if you've got sawdust in yours like mine does. Now there are 4 strain relief connections. There's 2 up here at the front, 1 at the motor, and then 1 at the power cord cable. Grab yourself a set of pliers and you'll squeeze this to compress it, and then simply just feed it through the connection. You're going to save the plate that comes off. You may have to feed these wires through individually. And then you're also going to save that strain relief and reuse that. That should loosen up. Generally they're banded together with 2 halves. Sometimes they come apart and you can still put them back together even though they're 2 pieces. That one's probably the easiest. You're going to have to squeeze these on the back and push them through, and you may have to fiddle with them a little bit and push them out through the front.
And you can talk.
Sometimes it's helpful to ease it out or pry it slightly with a screwdriver as you're compressing the backside. They're snug fits when they get installed, and it'll be a snug fit when you assemble it back together, but it'll be easier going back in than it is when it comes out. These little strain reliefs sometimes come out easy, sometimes they come out a little more difficult than others, but they're available should you need to replace one. If you've scarred it all up in removing it, you may want to replace it right now. They're available at most online retailers. With the strain release pulled off, you can feed the wires out through the cabinet. First, do the one feed from the switch box. This one is not going to come out yet because it comes up to the motor. We'll need to disconnect that. And then the other one, you'll pull out the entire cable assembly. This is your 110 volt cord. You may want to save this for other applications in your shop. Next, let's disconnect the wires at the motor. First, start by removing the ground screw. This will be the green wire, and it has a ring connection on the end of the wire. That'll be a Phillips head screw. Remove that screw and save the hardware. And now I'm going to remove the 2 wire nuts that are connecting the wires inside the junction box. Take the black tape off. We will refer to the wiring diagram as we make the new connections. Now remove the wire nut and then work on the second one. Remove the tape and the wire nut. Now separate and untwist the wires that lead to the cord, and then finally feed the power cord out through the front of the switch box and then out through the side of the machine. We can set this switch to the side. This is great for router tables or other applications in your shop as well. Now grab the new switch that you'll be installing on the machine, and we're going to check it to make sure it has a few things. We'll want to make sure that we have the hardware that mounts it to the front rail. There's going to be 2 square nuts on the top and then 2 screws that attach that from the bottom. This is a 220 volt switch. It also has the reset, which is 220 volt, and then on the bottom you're going to see the wires. You'll see one set with terminals, and these will end up at the back side of that DRO, the digital readout on the machine. The other one with the ring terminal and with the black and white connection, and it'll go back up to the motor. Let's go ahead and install those in the same order that the original one came out. I like to put the ones that are going to go to the DRO in the bottom hole, and then the top hole will lead to the motor. Feed those through and then feed the wire through. Leave it loose, don't put the strain relief on until you're all done with the wiring connections. Now I'm going to feed the motor wires through, and we'll run these back up to the motor, and we'll do this one first. Now we're ready to make the connections at the motor. If you haven't done so already, raise the motor all the way up. It gives you a little bit more room to work inside the machine. I've also put a drop light inside. It just gives me a little bit more light down in this area. Now we're going to refer to the diagram that comes with the machine. It'll show the old connection and the new connection, and also inside the motor connection box there's the same sort of diagram here, and what it shows you is that in the 110 volt configuration, like it already is, that the red and the yellow wires are jumpered together and leading to one of the wiring connections, and the black and the white were jumped together. And you can see those, I've left those twisted together. We're going to separate those, and before we put the wiring harness inside, we're going to make the new connections where the black and yellow wire are tied together. We'll put a wire nut on that, and then I'll bring the harness in, put the ground connection on, and then finally twist all the connections together. Just retwist the end of the wires. Now grab the black and yellow wires, twist those together. You twist those clockwise just as you'll do the wire nut. Now cap those securely with the wire nut, making sure that it's firmly in place, and give them a quick tug test just to make sure that the wires don't pull out. Once those are in securely, just take a little electrical tape wrap over the wire nut and over those ends of the black and yellow wire. Next, I'll bring the harness in through the opening on the electrical connections box. I won't put the strain relief on it yet. I want to have plenty of room. Get the green wire with the ring terminal and the screw that was removed earlier. And finally, secure this in place in the box. Next, we're going to connect the red wire and the white wire to the connections. And to make it simple, I'm going to connect the red to the black and the white to the white. Again, pre-twist the wires. Install the wire nut. Give it a tug test to make sure the connection is firmly made. Quick wrap with black tape. Since this is 220, the order of the connections is not as vitally important for the black and white wire that are in the power cable coming in. I just make it simple by matching the white to white and the black to the red, but they can be reversed if needed. And then finally, we're making up the last connection inside the box. And again, check that connection to make sure that it's tight. And tape off this last connection. With all the connections being made, let's go ahead and tuck these back inside the box. And then we'll reinstall the cover on this junction box. And then finally, after this is done, we're going to put that strain relief in place. When you're installing this cover, don't forget to put the gasket on. There's a gasket that was on there from the factory. Line it back up, line the hole over it. And now we'll go back in with the screw. Now that we've got the cover back on, it's time to install the strain relief. You'll notice that the strain relief has two flat sides that correspond with the flat sides of the hole. And as you install this, just wrap it around the wire, aligning those two flat sides up with where it's going to get pushed in. And then you'll get the strain relief up close, and then finally close the adjoining piece around the wire. And once that's in place, you'll push it into the hole until it locks on the wire. It'll compress around the wire as you push it into the hole. It may take a little bit of force to push this through, and you may have to feed some of the cord down through the body of the machine. And you don't want to have too much cord to push inside the box, as it won't let you push it in any further. So choke up and get real close with this strain relief before pushing it into spot on the electrical box. There we go. Now that wire is firmly in place. The next step is to prepare our power cord, and this is the 220 volt power cord. You want to make sure that you grab the right one and have the one here with the 220 volt connection. And then slide this metal ring over the wires. I'm just going to preload it on there right now. I'm not going to install the strain relief yet until I've made all the connections, but I do want to have this in place. And then finally, I'm going to feed the plug end through the opening on the back of the saw. And then I'm going to rest the remainder of the harness inside the machine. And then I'm going to feed these wires up through the back side of the digital readout. The other wire that's coming from the switch has the push-on connectors that have the additional spade on the outside. I've already had those fed through the outside of the saw. Now I'm going to feed those up through the DRO inside the machine. I leave the switch loose so I have plenty of room to move it around. Make sure that the little square-headed nuts are aligned and slide right into the extrusion. Square the back one up, then slide this over close to the saw, and once you've got the connections made and the strain reliefs in place, you can go back and adjust the switch to the most comfortable position for you to use it. And right now is a good time to reinsert the cover on the end of the extrusion for the front rail. Now back up at the front of the saw, at the DRO position, locate the two green wires. These are the grounds that we've installed into the front, and we're going to connect those to the two holes on the back of the box. We'll grab the small screws that have the star washer, and I like to pre-install them into the ring terminal on the ground wire, and then screw those in place. Once the ground wires are installed, just double check to make sure that they're tight. You don't want to have a loose ground at this position. And now we're going to go back through and connect the power wires to the back side of the digital readout. Make sure that the digital readout is at the top of this board, and you'll find the two connections right here. We're going to go black on the top connection. That slides right over. And I'm going to go white to the bottom connection. Once those are in place, we'll bring the black and white wire from the opposite side and install those over the spade terminal that's on the existing connector there. You want to verify that these connections are tight. This is what they call a piggyback connection. You'll see the blacks on the top, the whites on the bottom. Now, check and make sure that all the wires get tucked in and you don't have any pinched wires as you install the DRO in the front. And line up the screw holes, and now insert and tighten down the 4 screws in the corner of the digital readout board. Now we're going to install these 2 strain reliefs for the wires that come from the power switch. Make sure that you have the switch in the position that you want it now, so go ahead and get that repositioned it. And I'll still leave it a little bit loose as I'm installing the strain reliefs, and then I'll come back and tighten up the nut and bolt in the front. Make sure that you've got enough slack on the outside without having excess cord, and then on the inside that you've got plenty of slack on the inside as well. Line up the 2 flats with the flat sections of the hole. Sandwich the wire with the strain relief connector. And then push it into the opening on the machine. At the rear of the saw, we'll reinstall the cover plate using the 2 screws from the outside. And after this is done, we'll feed the wire through at the appropriate length and then reinstall the strain relief. Once those are in place, tighten them down. And then finally, feed the power cord out, leaving a little bit of slack on the inside so that you're not pulling against the connections. And finally, install this remaining strain relief on the outside, paying attention to where the flat areas are. Now adjust the position of the on-off switch to a setting that you like, and then finally tighten down the 2 bolts on the bottom. Okay, that's in good shape. And finally, we're going to reinstall the cover for the motor. Tapered side down, Phillips head screwdriver. Now that everything on the saw is buttoned up and tightened up, it's time to apply the power and do a quick check on it. Plug it in, and again, we're plugging it into 220 volt power now. The DRO is on, that's good. Reset is set. Well, that's fantastic. Everything is working properly. The blade is spinning, starting, the stop switch stops, the DRO is on. It's an indication that everything is working good. I'm ready to go through and get this saw into use. Now, changing it from 110 to 220 volt power does not give you any more power on the saw, but what it does do is it reduces your amperage draw by about 50%, and so it makes it more efficient. If you have any questions during the installation, you can go to our website at lagunatools.com, click on the accessories tab, and then look under the switches, and you'll find the instructions there. You'll find this video there as well if you need to reference it. And if you do have any questions, you can always call us toll free at 800-234-1976. We really appreciate your business. Thanks so much.